it's like a house of cards. It just collapses. All your research collapses within one moment, looking at another doctor.
Precisely. That's exactly what happened
Right.
countless of times. And that's why I decided that I need to dig deeper. And of course, I had, one doctor on my radar. I was like, set, that's it, I'm going with him. And then after I found something further, I was like, okay, let's look at something else. And I had probably like 10 doctors like that I was like ready to book my tickets, and then at the end it's like, you know what, let's step back.
One of the things that people over obsess about is the size of the punch, and often the size of the punch is measured differently from one punch to another.
Obviously, his attention to detail, he's perfectionist when it comes to this, just like me. The donor is finite. I always say that the donor is like a finite bank account. Once you run out, game over. So
did you see any improvements from the micro needling into your scars?
It's interesting, isn't it?
You're gonna make me watch the video now, aren't
yep.
you?
I've got a quote from probably like 50 or 60 clinics all around the world.
Okay, so welcome to the podcast today, and I've got a very special guest who has had 3 hair transplants, so not quite as many as me, but he's had 3 hair transplants over the last few years. He's also got his own YouTube channel, which he's got nearly 20,000 subscribers, and he's administrator on Hair Loss Conquerors, which is a Facebook group. So if you're on there, you probably would have seen him as there as well. But welcome to the podcast, Rolandas.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure. And I've been, seeing some of your content recently that you started, on your social medias, and I was really impressed, and actually we are lucky to have you in general in the community. As you know, there's a lot of, misinformation out there. So it's great to have someone who actually knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. And I feel the same about you. Obviously, there's a lot of people out there giving information, but I've always found you very credible and very honest in terms of your documentation. And I've enjoyed watching your content over the years. And I thought it'd be a great opportunity for us to have a bit of a chat together. So I think the first thing I'd like to know, and I expect the watchers would like to know, is just a little bit about your journey. So if you can sort of maybe start from when you first noticed your hair loss and what age you were.
Well, where do I begin? I think the first time when I noticed that I'm losing my hair, I think I was 21 or 22, but looking back at the pictures, I was already not going towards pretty good Norwood 3. So it just shows that I really didn't care about my, perfect hairline like most people nowadays are. They're like obsessed. And I think it's obviously due to social media. But yeah, it kind of started progressing pretty rapidly. I believe when I was 25, 26, I was already nearly Norwood 5. So it was pretty bad, pretty quick, and it's obviously my genetics are not not great. My father is nearly Norwood 7. It's like not full blown, but quite nearly there. So yeah, I kind of inherited this, and unfortunately, I was not. I didn't start using proper medication, to battle hair loss, and hence why I managed to become a Norwood 5. Unfortunately, it's too much, fear mongering online, and I've been one of them. Unfortunately, I've been listening to some negative things, and I thought, no, I'm gonna do the natural way, and here we are, Norwood 5.
Okay, so you had a first hair transplant before you started medication, was that right?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. So yeah, I think if I recall, I haven't done anything with my hair loss until I reached sort of like Norwood 4. Once I started noticing that my mid scalp starts thin out and going towards the crown, and the visual density kind of disappeared. That's when I realized, like, oh my God, something bad is going on here. I need to address it because, like I mentioned earlier, I didn't particularly care, about the hairline, so I didn't really notice it, slowly receding. But once the volume disappeared, I was like, okay, I got to do something about it. So, as anyone else, probably I've done everything and anything that you can find at that time, starting from scalp massages to some, topicals, oils, all kinds of things, the rosemary oils and, stuff like that. And obviously nothing, worked, as we know, until I decided, what, it's time to just do something serious about it. And I started, finasteride and minoxidil, topical as well. I've been on it for at least a year before my first transplant, so obviously stabilized my hair loss. And it was, on a Norwood 5, but it was pretty stable. And I would say up to now, it didn't really progress much. I've been on on medications over 5 years, I believe now, maybe 6 years. I already lost the count. But yeah, it's pretty much stable. And, so that's why I decided to go for a transplant. And when it comes to transplant, it's actually interesting. I'd never even considered one. I just totally by accident saw one article from some British guy, some British article, that, he went to one of the British clinic and he had a transplant done. And I saw like somewhere on the Facebook, his post like before and after. And I was like, God damn it, that looks so freaking good. How is this even possible? And then I was like, oh, that's a hair transplant. Okay, well, let me research more about it. And I started looking and started realizing essentially that, the transplants are not only for, elite. You don't have to be super, mega rich to have a transplant. And that's basically was my initial, stages of, researching. Mm-hmm. And that was back in like 2016, 17, I believe.
Okay.
I've done a good amount of research. It was like obviously overwhelming, going on the forums and Reddit and everything like that, and all of this information. And then you're trying to decide which doctor, which clinic to go to, and it's just like a minefield. The more research you do, it feels like the more confused you become.
Yeah.
And it's just overwhelming. So that's basically where I started.
Okay. And in terms of like your research, how did you narrow it down to, obviously you saw this result online that you thought was great. How did you narrow it down? Did you have many consultations with doctors prior to making that first step?
Yes. So I'm this kind of person who is very logical, really logical, and I want to break down everything step by step. And, I started obviously pretty broad. Turkey, looking at my budgets, different clinics. It's pretty broad, all these names. But I realized I need to learn more about how the good transplant looks like, why the good transplant is good and why the bad one is bad and stuff like that. So for me to understand because otherwise, if I don't understand all of those things, how I can, understand which doctor is better than the other, where I should go, because I've noticed one thing, that trusting people's opinions is not necessarily a good thing. Everyone has different opinion. Some people, and obviously now with experience, I see it all the time, people with bad results, usually the most confident ones, and they like, yeah, this clinic, go there, even though they have overhouse a donor. So that's what I realized, and I started obviously digging deep, learning about the craft, learning about FE, FET, and all of that stuff. And it took me, I would say, nearly 2 years of deep research that was like properly nearly 24/7. I'm not gonna lie. From the moment I wake up, I'm on the forums. While I'm having my breakfast and I'm commuting to work, I'm researching. I was listening to the Bold Truth podcast. By the way, that was a good resource for me as well. I was listening through my headphones, on my work lunch breaks, then commuting back, and then the whole evening. And I kid you not, like literally nonstop. Every moment of my free time, I was researching. And wow. I was on this kind of research mode for like nearly 2 years. So as you can understand, spending like, I don't know how many, like hundreds, thousands of hours, you learn a lot.
Yeah,
obviously.
Did you go through a space though? Because I've always thought there's doing research is great. And I think it's so important that you do that to find the right doctor. But when you spend so much time on the forums, on Reddit, on these sorts of places, that you can often, someone says something to you about a bad comment about that particular doctor, don't go to that doctor. And suddenly it's like a house of cards. It just collapses. All your research collapses within one moment. And so did you have a lot of that where you thought you found a doctor and then you reached a dead end and then you end up looking at another doctor?
Precisely. That's exactly what happened countless of times. And that's why I decided that I need to dig deeper and not, listen to anyone who, because obviously people are going to be biased as well. There's financial motivations. I just need to understand for myself. And of course I had, one doctor on my radar. I was like, set, that's it, I'm going with him. And then after I found something further, I was like, okay, let's look at something else. And I had probably like 10 doctors like that I was like ready to book my tickets, and then at the end it's like, you know what, let's, step back. And to be honest, that was a good thing. I've, obviously stepped back quite a bit, and I decided to research more until I was 100% confident when I found my doctor, which is Dr. Ferreira in Portugal. Even though, surprisingly, I don't know why I decided to go with him. Back then, he was unknown. There was nothing online. There are barely a few cases that you can see. But what gave me confidence is when I spoke with him, he presented some of the cases that are similar to mine. He explained in quite, in detail why, he proposes what he's proposing, and obviously kind of essentially clicked, with me that my idea of what I need to get done is pretty much similar to what he's suggesting. So we kind of like, our mindset aligns, and that's why, I decided to go for him essentially. But yeah, it was definitely a minefield, back and forth. So that's why I always say to, people who are, I'm speaking to privately or on my YouTube channel, that always never listen to anyone, including myself. Make up your own mind. You have to understand why. If I'm saying, this result is great, why? Understand why is it great. Just listening, it's not enough. And if it's very easy to fall into the trap of people who don't have necessarily your best interest in mind, and you don't want to risk it essentially.
I totally agree. I think some people, they want everything spoon-fed for them. They want to have your advice, and they want you to tell them where to go, what to do. And I always say to patients that I can't do this for you, because what you see in terms of like your hair and what I see in terms of your hair is very different, and what you see when you look in the mirror, and also it's very subjective. Different doctors have different ideas of hairline design, hairline shape, the density, how you transition from the forehead into the hairline, the softness and irregularity, all those types of things. And it's down for the individual to work out what you like. Did you ever get to the point where you put money down, like as a deposit, on any other doctors that you had to back out on at all? Or?
I haven't, because I thought if I'm gonna put a deposit, that's it. I'm kind of down. So I was very close to it, like again, many times, but I haven't. It was, to be honest, it was painful to do this step back so many times. But yeah, at the end, like I said, I'm pretty happy with my choices and where I end up.
Definitely. I think it's an important point, and actually I was going to talk about this, is deposits, because when you put down a deposit with a clinic, in some cases that deposit is transferable and it's also refundable, but in other cases it's not refundable at all. So you really need to think about, before you make that commitment to put money down, you need to find out what the terms and conditions are when it comes to that deposit. So find out that before you give a clinic any money for deposit. Find out what your rights are if you want to cancel or you want to reschedule that deposit. So moving on from there, Dr. Ferrara, and 2016, did you say you had your first hair transplant? Or was that
No, my first one was in actually beginning of 2020.
Oh, 2020. Okay, right.
Yeah.
So I met him at a conference in Prague, and I can't even remember when this was. I think it was 2018, and he was relatively new. He was quite a young doctor at the time, but I remember hanging out with him, and actually think hanging out with him before in a conference in Turkey that I went to in 2015, and Joe Tillman was there. So yeah, he's a really good guy, and I could definitely see that he was going to be somebody that was going to make quite a wave when it comes to hair transplantation. But you found that you're on the same page with him, which I think is really important, to find a doctor that you click with.
100%. I mean, to me, what was the most important is obviously his attention to detail. He's perfectionist when it comes to this, just like me. And, I just love the way he creates the hairlines, the micro irregularities, the single hair grafts, the really great angulations. It's just on another level. Like, he's literally on the top of there, next to some other top, doctors in the world. And he was back then as well. So I feel like back in 2019 or 2018, late 2018, when I found him, it was like a gem. I felt like is it too good to be true? This is such a great doctor, this great results, this amazing donor management and everything. And he's not known at all. And he was back then working, I think, part-time in his own clinic and part-time in Dr. Jose Lorenzo in Spain, in his clinic.
Yes,
So yeah, he was like kind of starting out, trying to make a name for himself. So yeah, I feel like I just discovered the gem. So obviously, I took this leap of faith, so called, because for some people it's very important to have a lot of social proof by a lot of documented cases on the forums and stuff like that. While for me it was the same, but I had really this good gut feeling, if it makes sense. And yeah, I just decided to go for it. And first transplant obviously was a huge success. Totally transformed my hairline. I covered the frontal third. Then for the second one, I went to cover the rest of the area, which was mid-scalp and partially top of the crown. And it was amazing. I had in 2 surgeries, I had 6,500 something grafts. Okay. And it was like such a home run. If you go back, in 2021, 2022, like it was all my results were all over the forums. People were just like saying that's just, one of the best, that's when I actually started YouTube as well. They were saying it's like one of the best results on YouTube and stuff like that. And the third one, I've done it only because, Dr. Ferreira one day reached out to me like, over a year now, saying, so how are you, Rolandas? Are you planning for a third one? I was like, you know what? I'm actually pretty happy. I have other, more important stuff in life. I was, planning for my own wedding and stuff like that. So, and he's, and then I said, well, unless, you're going to give me a surgery for free, then you know what? Why not? the hair grid kind of clicked in and he said, you know what? You've done a lot to me. Fine. So I was like, yeah, let's do it. So that's why I've done the third one. I didn't really need it. It was a small surgery, like 1,000 grafts, just like here and there, few, areas sprinkle all around. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I was definitely pretty happy with my 2 transplants. And I mean, my hairline and everything is really just a result from my first one still. It hasn't been changed, it hasn't been lowered or anything like that.
Yeah, I think it's a great hairline design that he's given you, and it works well with your head shape and your bone structure, and it works well with your the rule of thirds and so on. But so the third procedure was fairly recently, then, was it?
Well, it's already over a year, but yeah, okay. I've done it last year.
Yeah,
so it's already basically full result. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the sign of a good doctor. He's obviously willing to look after you. You've done a lot of documentation, and I'm sure you've brought him a lot of patients, which is.
I suspect that's why.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But you did it during COVID, then. So your first 2 surgeries. So was that difficult to plan from where you're based to getting across to Portugal, isn't it, where he is?
Yeah, so the first one was actually before, so that was end of January, and then the COVID came in, at least in UK where I live currently. It came in after a few more months. So it was kind of a good time, I guess, because after the surgery, my scalp was totally, red in the front, like looking awkward, and I went to work maybe like for a few weeks, and then or actually, no, it was probably a month. And then boom, lockdowns. So, it was great. I stayed at home, grew my hair, started, had all this time in the world, started YouTube channel, started, documenting and sharing, my experience and what I've learned. Because one of the things that was frustrating to me when I was doing my own research, that there was a lot of information missing. It's like, it was really difficult to find certain aspects, of the surgery, of even hair loss, on a broader scale. Because everyone's just, I feel like either overcomplicates it or just talks about things that are not important. At least I feel that's how I felt like. And that's why I decided, I started documenting my own journey, and I will, show, first of all, my transplant from every single possible, angle, light condition. If you're going to go back, I've got like 200 plus videos, and I've like, whatever you think of, it's there, different hairstyles, different, hair length. I've analyzed my donor. I've done even, things like experiments on my FE scars. I've done like microneedling for 6 months. Then I shaved it down to 0 just to see the scars, whether they improved or not. So I've done all kinds of things.
Sorry to just interrupt. Did you see any improvements from the microneedling into your scars?
It's interesting, isn't it?
You're going to make me watch the video now, aren't you?
You see, that's something you're not going to find anywhere else. In short, maybe. And that's not a perfect answer, I know. But the problem with me, with the way my body is healing, I'm creating something that's called hypertrophic scar. It's not full blown, but it's like my scars are slightly raised and they're a bit more white, like there's less pigment. They're properly white actually. So even if I'm like pale skin, my FE scars are like just pure white. They're standing out quite a bit and they look bigger than actually are. Dr. Ferrer was using 0.8 millimeter punch, but they look bigger than that just because the way it's healing. So I would say after microneedling for 6 months, I think they became more flat. So it's not necessarily, it didn't really help much, but it helped me because they're not raised anymore. They're a bit more flat, so therefore they don't stand out as much. They look very slightly smaller. But unfortunately, it didn't, improve itself. They didn't, regain some pigment or anything like that.
Okay, that's interesting because I've actually had some grafts put into my old FUT scars. So I heal like you with a really white scar tissue. And this is something that people don't often talk about. And it's down to your own physiology in terms of how you heal after FUE. You can, one of the things that people obsess about is the size of the punch. And often, the size of the punch is measured differently from one punch to another. Some use external measurements, some use internal measurements. So you're not really comparing apples to apples in that respect.
Indeed.
But I heal with very white scar tissue, and I've done some surgery into my scars, and it grew well, as you would expect. Obviously, you don't tend to overpopulate the area in terms of grafts, but one thing that I noticed is that it did change the pigment of the scar tissue. I think just by making the incisions, increasing the blood flow, it definitely makes a difference. So I have experimented with SMP into my scars, which has been pretty disappointing. And I've also done some surgery into there as well. But I'll check out that video because it sounds interesting.
I mean, to be fair, with FE surgery, when you're implanting grafts into the scar tissue, obviously you're creating much deeper incisions than you would do with a microneedling, and hence why probably you saw some improvement. I to be fair, I was using pretty long needle length, is 1.5 millimeters. So that's according to the studies, at least for hair loss, that was the standard, needle length. So I decided to go for the same one. I had that, microneedling pen, so it was like penetrating right there. But yeah, partially I think was definitely not enough depth. But then if you're gonna go too much, then there's a chance you can cause more issues. So I was not.
It's a difficult one. I do remember. I think where I was working previously, I think you had some contact with the clinic. I do remember having some communication, I think, with you back in the day when you were probably researching hair transplants.
It is possible. I've reached. Sorry, and I probably didn't answer one of your questions. Yes, I've reached out to countless of clinics. I don't know. I've got a quote from probably like 50 or 60 clinics all around the world. Wow. It's just I went all in. Like I thought about it. Like if doctors are willing to, or clinics are willing to give you a free consultation, why not?
Yeah.
Like the more options or the more perspective you have, the better, right? So that's what I've done. I've collected this huge amount of perspectives from different doctors about me, what I need, what's possible, what's not possible, and I've made for myself like an average, and that kind of, what was my basis of my thinking essentially. I've took an average from all of this, people, and that's, where I am currently actually, and it's again worked out pretty well.
Yeah, and I guess you would have learned a lot from that. But what is there a take-home message that you got from researching with a number of clinics that you could maybe help pass on to the listeners here?
Yeah, 100%. So first of all, never rush into this. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I spent over 2 years, 24/7. I can guarantee vast majority of people not going to be spending this much, time and effort into research, which is fine, totally fine. I'm just, being obsessed about it. But definitely you need to understand why certain doctors are good or bad or average and stuff like that. Because like I said earlier, it's very easy to fall into the trap if someone's going to be saying, oh, go to this doctor, he's the best. Yeah, but why he's the best? You don't understand this. And then there's money involved, and it might not be the best for you as well. Mm. So there, obviously, like you mentioned, everyone, is totally different person. There's a total different, canvas to work with, different amount of, hair loss, different hair caliber, different hair characteristics. The donor itself, it can be multi-hair grafts, or you can have only singles and doubles. And then there's, can I influence how many grafts you can transplant, or even how, like 3,000 grafts, let's say, gonna have much less density versus if you have like a lot of triple squats and quintuples even. So all of those aspects, I always suggest to research as much as you can, and try to look at the resources that are talking the way it is, not the nice thing just trying to sell you something.
Yeah. Okay.
Because if you don't know, you might it's a very high chance you might be taken for a ride. And the problem with this is the donor is finite. I always say that the donor is like a finite bank account. Once you run out, game over. So what you're gonna do if you're gonna take 5,000 grafts, 6,000 grafts in one surgery, 30% of it grows. What you're gonna do? You left almost with nothing, and then God knows, maybe your donor was over harvested. There's nothing to kind of replenish to make it look better. So it's not about the money, because no amount of money can bring back the hair, unless of course we're gonna have some hair cloning at some point, which I'm not holding my breath.
No, I did a video. I was going to be 70 by the time we got hair cloning.
Yeah, I've seen that. That was such a great video, by the way.
5 years away. Yeah, well, I mean, it sounds like you did things correctly, though. I mean, you're almost textbook when it comes to what you should do. Yeah, okay, you spent a lot of time researching, but I think that's a good thing. Some people, they just turn up for a consultation and they don't know anything about the doctor. They don't know anything really about hair transplants. They just want more hair. And that's a really dangerous thing to do, because then I think the most dangerous thing to do is to be in a rush. As you mentioned, you took your time, and that's the biggest advice you can give patients. But the patients who come in and they want to do it ASAP, and it doesn't matter about the result, it doesn't matter about anything else, it's just about timescales. Because you're then going to be very vulnerable to clinics who are going to use you for getting in there as soon as possible. Going back to COVID, actually, that was an interesting thing I never spoken about before, is that so you had your hair transplant done just 2 months before we all went into a lockdown. And I remember that because I was working within a clinic at that time. And there was a brief period when we were in lockdown, and I was thinking to myself, is anyone going to, because we didn't know this was this new virus, and I didn't know if it was going to change our lives forever at that point. So you'd obviously just had a hair transplant and you were going through the recovery. Perfect time to have it done, downtime and so on. And that's how the industry was, is that everyone was using that time. All of a sudden, all of these executive people who have to wear a suit for work or have to turn up at the office, and they can only use their holiday as downtime, and they didn't really want to use 2 weeks annual leave. Rather than going on somewhere nice and sunny, they didn't really want to be sitting at home recovering from a hair transplant. So it gave this unique opportunity for patients to have a hair transplant. There was one moment, though, when I thought to myself, is anyone going to care about their looks anymore? We're going to enter this sort of world where we're all locked down, we're never going out. Is anyone going to care about their hair anymore? So, but it turned out, yes, they definitely did.
Yeah, that was definitely a good timing, and I think that's when actually exploded everything, because even the forums, the Facebook group, I remember when I, back then joined, now I'm running it. It was nothing almost, and then it's just like exploded everything everywhere. Everyone was all of a sudden into the topic. Everyone wanted to have a transplant as soon as possible, while they still sitting at home. And I get it. I mean, there are some people. I've recently spoke to a person who are really keen to keep privacy, keep it private as much as possible, and they prefer not for anyone not to know that they had a transplant. So that was a perfect opportunity for this kind of people, to be honest. So the COVID time definitely was, I think, the big catalyst to kind of exploding this industry.
Yeah, it definitely was. Just going back to when you first started noticing your hair loss, just about the how it made you feel, because were you somebody that was, I mean, I suspect that you were, because you spent a lot of time researching these things, but were you somebody that it really bothered? I mean, did you find that it started to limit your life in terms of what you would do in terms of socializing or sports and so on?
100%, especially when I became like Norwood 4 going to 5. That was, and actually it's very painful to remember. I didn't care, but at the same time I did care. It's tricky. Like, when we don't have things, we want them, and when we to have things. We like don't care anymore.
Yeah.
And that's the same with hair, at least for me. So when I noticed my mid-scalp and going to the crown, like really thinning out to the point that there's almost nothing left, I started growing my hair from the back and having a massive comb over. It's probably one of the biggest comb over you could probably see. My hair was starting from the bottom of my crown, covering all the way to the crown, to the hairline here. So it was massive flap, essentially. I was putting a lot of hairspray. I put in the morning, minoxidil, and then dries out after 20, 30 minutes. I put the hairspray, off I go. To conquer the world. And then if there's wind, I'm literally going like this.
Yeah.
And I remember so many these painful moments when and I'm standing somewhere on the crossroad and this all of a sudden a massive gust of wind, and I literally have to just put my head there, and it becomes awkward when you're going with someone and you obviously don't want to talk that, oh, you have hair loss. I mean, I'm pretty sure people not stupid, they see, but people, again, nobody cares about you. People care about their own problems.
Yeah.
But it's awkward. And there's many times when it happened that the wind just blows into my hair and my flap like and it's just, it's awkward. It's annoying. I remember I kind of developed even anger issues, if it makes sense, with because I'm leaving the house and I want this to stay the way it is. And then this massive wind blows away. And I was like, why are you doing this? Like, I clearly don't want this. And then obviously if it's rain, it's even worse. So it was a constant battle. It was like 24/7 on my head, how my hair looks, whether it sits, because it had to sit in a very specific position without moving. To be fair, I think I've been doing a pretty good job with the comb overs. I think I've sent you some of the pictures with this.
Yeah.
Some people couldn't even realize how bald I was. You can see there's no hairline, but you would never think that I'm like bald all the way towards in Norwood 5 area towards the crown.
I mean, most people can style their hair very well, and they get really adept at doing this sort of comb over hairspray kind of job and so on. But yeah, it's when you get in those windy conditions. And I had it when my crown was very thin, so I had it the other way around. My hairline had better density, but my crown was really thin. So when you have low density, either thinning or a low density hair transplant, and your hair has a little bit of length to it, as you know, the wind catches it and you end up with this sort of waving kind of hair across here, which is never a good look. And often, you've had you're going out or something, or going into work, and the first thing you want to do is rush into the gents' toilets and check out whether what your hair's looking like, what the damage is.
Indeed, it's brings me back. Something that I definitely, happy that I'm not experiencing anymore. And that's, in some of my previous videos recently that I've done, I've discussed that the main goal of the hair transplant, of a good hair transplant at least, is not to think about hair at all. The goal of transplant is to forget that you have even hair loss. I mean, sure, you still continue with your medication because hair loss is progressive. Male pattern baldness never really stops. Mm-hmm. But the point is that you go with your life with whatever hairstyle you have, in whatever, way, shape or form your hair is, and you don't care. And you feel normal, like a normal human being. I think that's the ultimate goal of a hair transplant, at least for me. And that's why I'm, always championing the best possible quality, the best possible outcome, because I strongly believe that what's the point undergoing, this procedure and then keep thinking about your hair. It's what's happening all the time when I see these people going to, some of these questionable clinics, mostly in Turkey, having this, surgeries done, super low hairline, or if the hairline is okay, it's like, pretty straight, there's very thick grafts, it just looks, implanted at incorrect angles, just sticking 90 degrees up. It looks fake, it looks artificial, and people are happy initially because, look, I was bald, now I have hair. Yeah. It's better with hair than without. Sure, great. 1 year passes and I see them. You know what? I'm thinking of doing a small procedure just to soften it up. Where should I go? And most of the time, like 99% of the time, it is the same. Like after transplant, they're happy. 1 year, 2 years after down the line, I see them coming back, to the forums and thinking how to make it better. Which means they are constantly thinking about it. They, you look in the mirror, what people think, it looks a bit, they see, most people, even with the bad transplants, they subconsciously know something is wrong, but people usually try to gaslight themselves into thinking, no, it's fine, nobody cares, it's perfect. But then there is this keep nagging at the back of their mind, and unfortunately that's what happens. And I think the biggest, like I mentioned, the biggest goal, what I believe is, you shouldn't be having this kind of thoughts at all. And that's what I had after my 2 transplants. I moved on. I actually stopped YouTube as well at some point because I had so many things, personal life going on, and I just forgot. I went, months at a time that without even a single thought about my hair. Like, I wake up, my hair is all over the place. Who cares? I just move on. I'm not even styling that often, to be honest. Now I have my hair pretty short, and I don't care. I have hair. That's all that matters.
But that's the beauty, though, isn't it? Is that, you can just wake up in the morning. And I went through exactly the same thing after my first repair in 2006. I documented it on the forums, and then I just got on with my life. And it wasn't until Joe Tillman sort of dragged me back in again to the industry, kicking and screaming, in beginning of 2010, to be a patient advisor, that I kind of moved on, really. But things opened up. I went traveling. I had so much more confidence. I even started acting on stage. Can you believe it? And I would never have done that, because stage lights are really bright, and I would never have even considered. It was only local amateur dramatics, but I would never have considered doing that, previously. My 20s were consumed with my hair loss, and but one of the things you're talking about patients is that you get these patients who never move on. There are some patients I've met over the years who just have unrealistic expectations, and I'm sure you've met them as well. And they are forever chasing the density into their hairline. They're ever wanting more and more. And you try to explain to patients that actually, you've got a pretty decent result. It may not be the best result, but you've got a decent result. But they want to have a second pass. And often then they have a second procedure and then a third procedure, and they never get to the point where they're ever happy. And that's a really dangerous thing, I think, for some patients, to keep on wanting more and more. Hair greed, they call it.
But I would say it's not necessarily tied to the hair transplant. This kind of thing is quite known phenomenon in any plastic surgery. Essentially, there are people who are never happy. They always want a bigger lips, bigger butts, and everything like that. It never stops. And at some point, you're obviously going. The more you keep going, the worse it looks. I mean, with a hair transplant, that's probably a bit different, but it's kind of the same mindset, that it's just some people are like this. And I think, to be honest, it's a minority, of people who are thinking this way. But you're right. I certainly had my fair share of, conversations with these kind of people. And I remember particularly one person I had to, he was messaging me probably at least once a month, and just keep going back and the same questions. What do you think? Shall I put a little bit more here? Shall I maybe bring my hairline lower, my temple peaks a bit forward? And he had a perfect hair transplant. He looked fantastic. I would like to have to have his hairline right now. That's how good he was. And but he wasn't quite there. And I had to constantly just talk him through this and explain look, why it's at some point it's not going to look natural. I mean, look, the nature created nature doesn't create the hairlines that are transplanted in your forehead muscles, and when you're talking they're just moving. That's not how it works. So but yeah, it's going to be people, unfortunately, like this, that's whether you like it or not, we will have them essentially in this industry.
No, I agree. And what's your view on the most important thing? Because I've got my view on what is the most important thing that patients should look for when it comes to selecting a surgeon. Is there a particular thing that you think is the most important thing?
I think there's quite a few aspects that there's not a single important thing. Well, to be fair, if I would single it out, I would probably say if a doctor does one patient a day, that's probably a really good start. Then it's likely that this doctor going to be putting at least 100% of his time towards you. When obviously then there's a question how good he is artistry, attention to detail and stuff like that. But if we're talking about one single, that's probably what it is. And ideally, if the doctor is doing all the parts of the surgery, and I have nothing against technicians, plenty of great technicians doing. My whole idea is, as long as the same people doing the same surgery, if you, let's say, going online, you see 20 results of, and this clinic, and let's say extractions were done by a technician, implantations been done by a doctor. Great, as long as this the same doctor doing implantations, the same technician doing extractions. If you see 20 results, chances are 21st is going to be the same, or something like an average of those, right? But if there's different teams always involved, or people that you cannot verify who is doing it, to me, it becomes a gamble. I would personally not even consider, just because I would like to give myself the best possible chance to have a successful transplant. And even though technically I'm not doing the surgery, but I can choose where I'm gonna go, who I'm gonna trust, with my hair, and I'm not gonna be desperate. I'm gonna do my research, and I'm gonna make 100% sure that this is the right place or doctor or clinic for me, essentially.
Yeah. I think that's a good thing. That's a very good point. Obviously, lots of clinics will use freelance technicians who they draft in, and you then don't know who's going to be operating on you from one day to the next. Depends on availability. They might be booked with another clinic. So I think having a consistent team, I think, is very important that works with the doctor. I think there are great technicians out there, and often some of the technicians are actually better than some of the doctors who are doing hair transplants for sure. But there are limitations in terms of what the technician should be doing,
and can legally do in certain countries as well.
Well, exactly what they can legally do, and there are guidelines. I know that bars have got a big sort of presence really regarding who makes the cut is the latest thing in terms of technicians who are then actually extracting the grafts or making incisions, which is a big no-no.
I wanted to actually, and sorry to interrupt, I wanted to expand a little bit further. Obviously, that was this particular point was like if we talk about only one particular case, but as I mentioned, there's so many other aspects what makes a perfect hair transplant. My personal criteria are very, I have very high standards, and there's so many of those criteria that the clinic needs to tick the box for me to even consider them for myself, or even recommending to others. And one of them, the aspects would be obviously consistency, but the hairline, how it's done, naturalness. While naturalness can be somewhat subjective, certain part of it is not subjective. It's pretty straightforward. If you look at the nature, how people without hair loss, how the hairlines looks, most of the hairs at the very front going to be single hair grafts. They're going to be very soft. They're going to be slightly, smaller, thinner hairs that, can be via surgery, can be extracted from around the ears, at the back, nape of the neck. It's not for everyone. Some people have retrograde alopecia and things like that. So it's not a safe hair. But I personally think, you can extract from these areas as long as it's the right patient, the right candidate, and it's been inspected. So if the doctor would, choose the right hair at the right angle, angulation is very important. It has to be pretty flat, good density. Again, with 50 grafts per centimeter square with the single hair graft, it's not going to be as dense as if you're going to implant 3 hair grafts, 50 of them. So that's obviously important. Obviously appropriate hairline design, appropriate, if you're gonna lower down the hairline, you must, look at the temple peaks. Everything has to make sense. Everything has to have, the appropriate proportions, because otherwise it just looks odd. We see them all the time, these hairlines that are just brought down to the absolute lowest point, but then you cannot really see the ends of it. It just kind of starts and finishes behind your ears, almost like, and it just looks very artificial and natural. And that's something I've done my fair share of experiments when I show to some of my friends who know nothing about the hair loss or hair transplants, like some pictures, and I ask, what do you think? And they look at the picture and they say, something is odd, but I don't know what. I cannot tell, I don't understand, but something is wrong here. And then when I point out, like, wow, you're right. It's and that's basically when people see you, they're not necessarily gonna think, oh, you have a bad transplant. But if the proportions are not there, something is not done to the way it's supposed to be in nature, people gonna notice subconsciously right away. Like the patterns, we see them. So the same thing if the hair being transplanted in a specific pattern, like in a rose, you can spot them right away as well, because that's not how hair grows in nature. And then obviously the donor management, it has to be, ideally utilizing as much donor as possible. I mean, the wider area, if again, possible by the patient, by his donor specific. I'm not a big fan of just extractions in a very narrow band, because then if you're going to extract a lot of them, becomes like difference in density between the areas. And there are a lot of doctors, especially those who are famous of doing this super duper mega extra, this mega sessions with 10,000 grafts. They're utilizing the every little centimeter, square of the donor. It's not necessarily a good thing for everyone, but for some people it can work. So if you extract, my philosophy is, if you extract from as big an area as potentially possible for you, then visually it's not going to look any different. So then you're able to extract huge amount of grafts for a lot of people, and the visual density going to drop all around, and it's still going to look great because there is no big difference in the drop of the density, and that's important. So there is a lot of things, the temple peaks, how it's done. It's a whole new other subject that I can spend probably an hour talking. It's just to make them natural. You've probably seen it yourself. Almost nobody does them.
All the time, and there's some quite high profile footballers I can think of where the hairline's been brought down too low to the to here, and then you don't rebuild up the temple points, and you end up having this really low wide hairline. And some people think, oh, it's a great result because it's quite dense and it looks low, but it looks odd. The shape of the hairline looks like, I call it like a letterbox kind of hairline in terms of like forehead, I would say, because it just doesn't look right. And I can think of so many examples, and clinics are showcasing these results as like, look at this, look at what we can do. And I look at it and think that looks really unnatural. It just looks odd. And I could talk all day about what I feel looks unnatural, and I've seen obviously so many patients over the years. But I think the hairline shape, and one of the things that I've always found odd, and people generally go abroad, and unfortunately it's often Turkey, but it's not just Turkey alone, is that when people design a hairline, they design these strong hairlines and they put all the highest density right into that first few centimeters of the hairline, just a band almost, and then straight behind that the density drops greatly. And it's just not what you see in nature at all. Your hairline recedes and thins, the whole thing thins, and you don't suddenly have a big thick band and then lack of density behind that as well. And often what you find is the forelock area here is the last bit to go. So you should concentrate the highest density into here, and the corner should be slightly softer in terms of how you design a hairline density. But again, it's just done the wrong way around, because visually when they ask their patients to send them pictures and they show them just the front on, you can see now, it looks like they've got a good thick head of hair. But naturalness is
100%. And actually, you mentioned Turkey. I wanted to maybe talk about more about the hair mills, because we always see them, we always even talk about it as well. But be honest, not specifically Turkey, but currently we both in the UK, right? So about the UK market, how does this look? So we're seeing are we seeing some of those same kind of mindsets being utilized here in the UK nowadays? Like it is in Turkey, when they're using this like factory, technicians doing a lot of parts. They're using multiple patients per day, multiple surgeries per day. They over harvesting donors, stuff like that. Would you say it's a concern, or that is creeping into the UK market? This kind of mindset, how the surgeries are done?
Yeah, it is, because and unfortunately some clinics, if they can't, if they haven't built their reputation on great results, one patient a day, all of those types of things, then they're competing on price. And when you're competing on price, and loads of guys from the UK, as we know, are going across to Turkey. So these clinics now have set up and they are price competing against Turkey. So people think, well, I don't really want to fly over to Turkey. I can stay in the UK, but you are just as much as at risk. And I've seen clinics in the UK offering surgery for as little as £2,000, and also this unlimited grafts. And when you look at the results, they are exactly the type of thing that you would expect to see from a hair mill. And I guess that can only happen if you are cutting corners. And by cutting corners, that means that the techs are going to be doing the majority of the work. the doctor may design the hairline, but some of the hairlines I've seen are just awful in terms of like the shape and how low they are, and yeah, it's not great. But yeah, I think that people need to be very, very careful, which is going back to this whole bars thing, why they're trying to educate patients about who is doing what aspects of the procedure. But just talking about that is, I think it's very difficult for patients, because once you've had, you know, local anesthetic and possibly some diazepam, some Valium, and you're then laying face down on like a massage table, how do you really know who's doing what? Because the doctor might start it off, do a few extractions, get the idea of the punch, and then sort of you know, disappear off into another room to do some consultations or to put his feet up, whatever. And then you've got technicians extracting the grafts. So I think it's
Yeah,
quite
100%.
difficult to know what's going on.
I've seen, you know, some doctors I know that they are operating in kind of similar way. And to be fair, some doctors, they're presenting really good results while operating in this way. So my personal opinion is it's not necessarily a bad thing, as long as, again, it covers the same basis what I mentioned earlier, as long as it's the same person doing the same thing over and over again in the same clinic. So again, if nothing against technician, to what I'm concerned, even technician can do from A to Z everything. As long as the same technician, he's done it so many times, results we see are consistently great. So if you're going to be the 105th patient and the 104 patients had a great result, well, it's very likely you're going to have a great result as well. So it doesn't really matter, you know. And again, even if someone is a doctor, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a good result. Like I mentioned, doctors are drawing this unnatural hairlines, and what I like to say is plenty of, you know, painters, very few artists. That's what I, you know, always, you know, mention. So it's not necessarily about who is doing the surgery per se, whether it's doctor automatically means it's better or technician automatically means worse. No, plenty of, you know, doctors and technicians doing good or bad. It's important to, like I said, again, going back, understand what you're looking for and identifying this, and that's it. And then the other aspects are just like secondary. As long as there's consistency in place, I think that gives you the better, you know, essentially, peace of mind that you're going to have a good result.
I think the problem is that when you're going to a clinic that's operating on multiple patients a day, that's the real issue, because you've got no assurances, because you know, some of these hair mills in Turkey, as for instance, I don't know about the UK, I don't know how many surgeries they're doing. I suspect if they're offering it for £2,000, they're probably doing a lot of procedures, but we don't know that for sure. But if you're going across, I hear, well, my friend had a great result there. Yeah, he flew off to Turkey. He went to X clinic.
Classic comment.
He had a great result. So I went there and I had a terrible result. You know, or one side grew in okay and it looks all right. The density's all right. The angles are okay, but the other side is just atrocious. Angles are off. The grafts are sticking up in the air. You've got poor growth. You've got poor density. So just because your friend went there doesn't mean to say that you're going to have the same result, because you may encounter a completely different team on the day. You may have had the best technician doing the work on your friend. And you might have one great technician on one side, and then one who's almost just out of training or is still training at that time. So you cannot get any consistency, and that's why I think it's so important to try and find a clinic, if it's really important to you that you want a natural looking result and you want the best possible result for you, to find a clinic that's only operating on one patient a day.
In ideal world, yes. Again, it can be, in my opinion, it can be 2 people a day, 3 people a day, as long as the same people consistently. But again, the more patients per day they have, the higher rate of, you know, the variability going to be of not so great. Because again, then how do you know which result that you look online has been done by A, B, or C? So you're introducing this, you know, this part that you're not quite, you know, sure. But while if there is one patient a day, every single thing you see online is going to be likely the same for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Basically as simple as that. And I wanted also to mention that a country itself is worth mentioning. It's not necessarily a good or a bad thing as well. So UK, if you're doing a surgery in the UK, doesn't mean you're going to get a good one. Right. Same goes to Turkey. Everyone loves to bash Turkey. I love Turkey. There's plenty of really good doctors that are really cheap just because, you know, the economy allows it. That's one of the reasons why, you know, in some countries it's going to be more expensive than the others. It's not necessarily just the doctor is greedy or anything like that. And that's why it worries me seeing, we know economy in the UK, it's definitely much more expensive everything than in Turkey, for example. And if someone is offering £2,000 for a, you know, massive surgery in one day in the UK, I'll be worried because they're cutting corners somewhere in many places. And, you know, that's definitely not a good thing. But Turkey, I had on the flip side, I have seen amazing results, like across the board. I was considering myself to go there to 2 doctors. I almost pulled the trigger, by the way. One of them particularly, I didn't go just because he offered beard grafts in my first surgery, while my donor was excellent. I knew it. And I was like, you know what? I don't think I need beard grafts, even though he's a terrific doctor, you know, making amazing results. But it just didn't feel right to me. And that's why I, you know, outed him essentially. But I you know, I always gonna say I recommend this doctor to people if I see that they might need beard grafts. Perfect candidate, you know.
Yeah, I think, well, we all get these sort of sixth senses when we're talking to the doctor. And I always say that you need to have a consultation with the doctor and make sure that you're on the same page and that you understand the advice that they're giving. Because what I've learned over the years is that you can have 5 different consultations. I know you had a lot more than that, but you can have 5 different consultations and come back with 5 very varying different opinions from doctors. Because what I've learned over the years, it is quite an opinions-based industry. As to what you might do, where you would put the hairline, how far the coverage, whether you should deal with the crown or not. All these sorts of things are down to the doctor's own personal preference. And so, yeah, I think it's really important to have a consultation, understand what the plan is for you if you're going to be moving forward. And ideally, that should be done in person. Did you fly to Portugal to meet Dr. Ferrara, or did you do it over
I haven't.
online?
I know I should have, but
You didn't?
it was, to me, it was enough. But I've seen a few other doctors in person. I've seen, for example, Dr. Bisanga, who is one of the top, you know, leading doctor in the world as well. I've seen him in person, and that kind of mostly gave me the confidence that what I think about my particular, you know, case and donor, everything is correct, because he reassured me, and he said basically all the same things what I thought about after doing all this research. So that's what I knew. If some other doctor gonna be saying similar things about my donor, what is possible, what is not possible, it's very likely that they're gonna they know what they're doing essentially.
I think that's really important, but it's going to a good doctor to have a proper assessment, because like someone like Dr. Pisanga, I've actually sat in consultations with him, and I know he does a. Did he shave a little bit of your hair? Because often he does. Yeah. So he checks.
He didn't shave, but he used the scissors, and he just cut in three different areas. Yeah. And I remember his patient advisor, I think it was Hilde. She said, "Oh, you know, you're gonna have to cut it. I'm sorry, that's the way." I was like, "I don't care. Cut it, shave it, whatever you do, whatever you need to do. Just tell me what what I need essentially." And he analyzed really thoroughly. He told me how many grafts per centimeter square I have in each part of the donor area, how many grafts I would need. He drew the hairline, he do the whole 9 yards essentially. The only thing he didn't do is because he was in the UK when he did it, is he didn't check with the trichoscope, as he also likes to do, obviously. But to me that was enough. But yeah, I suggest, as you, definitely speak to a doctor, ideally in person if you can. It's not going to be possible for everyone. And nowadays, if you're thorough, I don't think you necessarily need to go and overseas a doctor in person, as long as this person established that he's good. That you kind of minimizing already this risk of something going wrong. But you need to know about yourself before that. Like, you need to know your donor, you need to understand what's the reality of what kind of results you can expect and what's possible essentially before committing to a surgery essentially with any doctor.
No, that's really good advice. I think that ideally you would go and see the doctor in person, but nowadays you can take really clear images through your smartphone, and you take videos of your donor area. It's not easy to do it yourself, but you get someone to help you. And if you've had a consultation with someone who's as thorough as Dr. Pisanga, then I think that puts you in very good stead to know that you've got a good quality donor area. But I
Yeah.
think trichoscopy is so important when assessing patients' overall donor area. I've sat in thousands of consultations with Dr. Ball, who uses trichoscopy during part of his consultation. And it's very interesting. I learnt a lot from those consultations where you can see the variation in people's donor area. And I've also seen patients who've come back from having these big mega sessions, and when you look at the donor area, it's not just the scarring that's been created from the punch; it's the trauma often around the scar. You tend to see a lot of miniaturized hairs around these scars if they're using these really big punches. So you're not just removing and damaging that hair,
Surrounding area.
it's the surrounding areas as well. And that's when you start to see, I think, this sort of over harvested, sort of moth-eaten, depleted donor areas is not always just from the number of grafts. It's potentially the attempted grafts and also the destruction of the surrounding follicular units.
Exactly. I had recently a communication with one person who was trying to say that you cannot be over harvested with like 2,500 grafts. I was like, yes, you can. Yeah. It's not about the grafts amount; it's how it's done. You can, if you're gonna extract 2,000 grafts from this small area, it's gonna be one big hole, one big scar. So it's all done. That's it. Obviously, if you're gonna, like you mentioned yourself, you're gonna use big punches. You're gonna create too much trauma itself, and then the hair surrounding will stop growing, miniaturize, and then all of these little aspects contribute to overall look. So I've seen over harvesting donor with like 2,000 grafts plenty of times. It is absolutely possible. That's why I'm big fan of being obviously careful and managing donor. That like donor is the single most important thing to me. I think the donor is probably even more important than the top, because if you preserve the donor, it means there is chance you can come back and do a little bit more if something goes wrong. You never know. Maybe you're gonna have a lichen planopilaris and your transplant doesn't grow. Then you have to treat it before you're going for a second one. And and what do you do if you're gonna have 6,000 grafts transplanted and nothing grows, and because you have the scalp condition and you didn't know about it, and your doctor didn't care to check as well, and then you have no donor left. So that's probably another reason why I'm not a big fan of this, mega sessions as well, which is another subject.
Well, absolutely. But just going back to scarring alopecias and so on, I think it's something that people don't talk about and don't understand is that I known a patient who had surgery done probably 12 years ago, and he had an amazing first result, great first result. I think he was already on the website. He had such a good result. And then he went back for a second pass because he wanted to add the density, which is quite common when you're dealing with a larger area, as you know, and as I know. And he then developed scarring alopecia and steroid injections, high doses of finasteride, high doses of minoxidil treatment for years. And scarring alopecia is something that just obviously can just occur through the trauma of having a procedure. And it didn't flag up in the first procedure. He grew well. Second procedure, he grew in to start off with, and we thought he was going to have a nice result. But the second, around about 6 months, things started to change and he started to lose hair and his result was thinning. So it was a lot of time I spent really with helping him get through this moment. It's traumatic when you've had a bad experience and a bad result. And we can get on to repair patients, because obviously that's something that you see a lot of, I see a lot of, and that again is incredibly traumatic for patients. And often they are very demanding repair patients. They demand a lot of your time. They do all the research the second time or the third time that they never did the first time round. So they have so many questions. They have so much anxiety and concerns. But these procedures are high stakes. If I just look at my own situation, so 2006, I went to Hassan and Wong and I had a big mega session, nearly 5,000 grafts at the time. And I already had 3 FUT scars throughout my donor area. And I went to go and see a guy in the UK at the time. So this is like 2005. And he said, you've got about 1,000 grafts. Now, all I had was a bit of unnatural looking hairline and a bit of thin coverage into the crown. 1,000 grafts just wouldn't have cut it for me at that time to give me any kind of like peace of mind, natural result. So it was high stakes to fly all the way to Canada and have this big procedure done. Thankfully for me, it worked. It worked out. But that's how I know that, you know, for a repair patient, often if they've got a depleted donor area, that it's such a risk. You know, your trust in another surgeon again.
Yeah, definitely. And again, like I said, you know, you're gonna have very limited amount of hair to play with. That's again donor management, and then people usually start understanding this after the fact. And to me, it's always funny when some of this, you know, influencers going out and like start, you know, talking about they know everything, and then like how like look at I'm sorry, you didn't had you didn't do anything right the first time. Sometimes the second time around.
Yeah.
And then thankfully now you start understanding and researching and, you know, hopefully sharing a good, you know, information. But then like, so some people are just, I don't know, they're a bit overconfident and they're just going and spreading this not necessarily 100% truth. And it's damaging. A lot of people are very gullible and they just gonna, you know, see someone online now, TikTok, Instagram nowadays, so just everyone's exploding. That's partially the reason why I came back to YouTube after, you know, prolonged break, because I just noticed everyone and anyone talks about, you know, hair transplant offers, consultation and stuff like that. It's just, and then you look at them, they have bad results. They don't really know what they're talking about, or they know just the very basics, and then anything deeper is just like, what? So it's, to me, it was very concerning. That's and a lot of people, especially younger generation now, they, you know, starting losing hair. That's the only kind of resources they have, because they're young, they see these other young people, and that's how they're learning, and they think that's fine, which clearly is not. So my personal, you know, goal to is obviously educate as many people as possible with the truth. I never sugarcoat, and I say it the way it is, and I'm not afraid of say something that if like someone is, you know, talking to me personally, if I see something that I think is going to be in a negative way impacting the person, but he might not like it, I just gonna tell him. I mean, not going to be sugarcoating, because at the end of the day, the goal is to help people, even though sometimes they might disagree, just because they have this like pink glasses, basically, you know.
Yeah.
Unfortunately happens.
I was quite shocked really, because I was working in clinics for 15 years and I was busy and I had my head down to a little bit, and I didn't even have an Instagram account until a year ago. And I wasn't aware of, I was aware that these things were happening, that the influencers were out there, that they were getting discounted or free procedures to talk about this, these particular clinics. And, you know, they have no real experience, and they're having these procedures done and they're then documenting them from day one. They're not even waiting until they've actually got great results themselves. So just, you know, they're talking, endorsing the clinics right from the get-go. And there is so many people out there, and there's so many people trying to make a living now from social media. It's quite scary what is going on there today.
I mean, to be fair, you can probably apply the same logic to me. That's how I started.
Well,
You know, like influencer have it, transplant started, you know, showing the difference with me. I never been talking specifically about, I'd never been like, okay, you just go to Dr. Ferreira. You know, first of all, I never had any financial gain from it. And second, this is specifically why I started documenting, because I've noticed people have biases as such, and they show their results, even if they're documenting their own cases, in a very favorable light, in a very favorable, you know, like angles and everything. Sometimes they even, I've noticed sometimes they even put like a topic, you know, hair fibers, and just to kind of like, what, why? And it just, to me, it's very annoying. Why are they doing this? It's clearly, I can tell from like a mile away sometimes that, you know, something is wrong, but and you can style, you know, the hair in a way that it looks fantastic, but in reality it's just such a, you know, low density, you know, the angles are off. And there's plenty of examples like we see from, you know, some of the like celebrity YouTubers, like for example CBum, you know, the Mr. Olympia champion of like I think 6 times now, is the one of the biggest names. And I've recently done a video as well that got quite a, you know, good amount of views, and people going back in the comments and they say, no, his hair transplant looks great. It's like, no, it's not. I'm sorry. His hairline starts and ends behind the ears. You don't see anything. And plus it's transplanted nearly 90 degrees up. It's just, you know, multi-hair grafts in a perfectly almost straight, you know, line implantation. There's 0 microregularidity. It's just, it looks awful. But, you know, and if you're going to look at his recent videos, he found a way to style it. I'm pretty sure he's using some concealers, fibers for sure. Because if you look on a natural, it looks pretty decent right now, minus the design. Obviously, design you cannot fake that.
Yeah, that design, the way it just sort of curls
Yeah,
round, and the angle that it joins here on the temple points is just all
exactly.
wrong. But I don't know. I was thinking about him because I've been looking at his result. I wonder whether that type of person that spends that amount of time bodybuilding cares about whether their hairline looks natural, because you'd argue whether the body looks natural in terms of like whether you spend that amount of time being Mr. Olympia, whatever he is. I don't know too much about him, but do they care? I suspect probably
100%.
they do. They do care when they look in the mirror and they feel to themselves, this doesn't look right. And I know there's been quite a few celebrity types who've had these hair transplants and then end up having corrections and so on. So I suspect we'll see him having repair surgery done over the course of the next few years.
Hopefully, because he has so much potential and just like ruined a lot of things with this really bad result. There's a multiple like reasons why I think, like you think about it, this kind of person clearly knows a lot about the bodybuilding, the nutrition and everything like that, because he probably spent a lot of time researching. Why he didn't spend equal amount of time researching this? And the reason is what I think, that some celebrities have, developed this kind of ego in a way that because they are celebrity, automatically they think that all of the best things are now available to them on a silver platter. And they feel like, only the best clinics gonna come out to them and ask, offer to do a surgery for free, maybe even pay for it. And they don't think much, because in a nutshell, if you don't really do much research, you would think every single transplant is the same. It's like, it's like a kind of cookie cutter. It's the same procedure applies to everyone in the same exact way, and that's it. While, when you start researching, you obviously realize that's not the case completely. And I think that's basically what it is. They feel like they deserve the best. And that's why these clinics, the Turkish specialty clinics, they succeed with this type of marketing. They're really, like in the last 2-3 years, they got so incredibly popular, some of these clinics, with this type of marketing, by offering to everyone and anyone, all of these influencers across the board, free surgeries. There's a certain clinics that have done, like, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 influencers, the same clinic, and all results are exactly the same, copy paste, terrible. You would expect at least put some effort into this celebrity, But if that's their best result, imagine what kind of thing an average Joe can expect. And nothing against Joe, by the way.
Well, yeah, poor old Joe gets a lot of stick. But I guess, who's at fault here? Is it? Is it the celebrity for not doing their research and just expecting that they can get the best and they deserve the best and they get it for free? Or is it the clinic? I suspect it's the clinic also promising the celebrity that you're going to have the VIP service. We're going to put you in the best hotel. We're going to accommodate you with the best meals when you're here. And that's often is the case, is that the clinic will sell this procedure as being the best, so that you're going to get the best technicians working on you. You're going to get the best surgeon, our most experienced surgeon. And I often see that sometimes with repairs where, people, one of my biggest issues is where people have a bad result with one clinic, and then they go back and they discuss it with the clinic. I'm not happy because of this. It looks unnatural and so on, or whatever their grievance is. And the clinic says, okay, well, we'll put it right. We'll get the best team this time. We get the best technicians. We get the best doctor
This time.
Well, yeah, this time.
Every time.
Yeah. Why didn't you get it right in the first place? And why would you consider going back to a clinic that butchered you the first time round, but just because it's going to be for free? And I've heard that before, and I've counselled with these patients. They contact, they're not happy with the result, but the clinic's going to get me back in again, so I went back to them, and then I get back them again. When you've done it for 15 years, you get these patients back again. Sometimes they're like, I'm really sorry, but I did take up that option of that free of charge surgery, and I'm still not happy. And it's like, well, if they didn't get it right the first time, what makes you think they're going to do it any different the second time?
They not magically learn how to perform a perfect hair transplant. That's exactly the problem. I've actually, funny you say that, about a month ago, I spoke with one guy. He had kind of subpar result. He has done the surgery here in the UK with one doctor, and it wasn't, that great. It wasn't end of the world. It wasn't terrible. The donor wasn't over harvested, but it just was very poor growth, and it's not quite there, angulation, stuff like that. And he obviously went to the doctor, complained. The doctor said, let me put it right. I'm going to do, for you a touch-up free of charge. He's scheduled already. And he told me, I was like, no. If he couldn't do it the first time. And I get it. Free of charge. You don't want to spend, much money and stuff like that. But the donor is finite. You potentially can end up in the exact same situation, if not worse. You never know what's going to happen. Every surgery is a gamble, like you said. You might have a fantastic result the first time around, but the second time you're going to go in, all of a sudden you have all these complications and all of your results are gone. And you end up, in a worse situation that you were before. So there's always a risk. There's always a gamble. So try to minimize it as much as possible. And step number one, don't go to the same place who, didn't do it right in the first place. Because, again, they cannot just magically learn how to do the good transplant if they haven't done it the first time.
I say this, but I made the exact mistake when I was in my early 20s. But so I had my first hair transplant, and the results weren't great. Next year I went back to a different clinic, but then my third transplant. I went back to the same clinic again because they were going to offer to do it discounted. So I say to patients all the time, it's like, I made so many mistakes, so just don't do the things that I did when I was in my 20s, like rush into a hair transplant, not do any research, not do medication, have a bad result, go back to the same clinic again. I'm textbook in terms of all those mistakes I made when I was in my 20s. I didn't get it right until I was in my 30s. So thankfully.
That's why I have a very big pride in myself. And who else gonna tap me on the back if not myself? I feel like I've done the right choices when it comes to transplant. When it comes to hair loss management, totally, mistakes after mistakes. But when it comes to, hair transplants, I learned from my own mistakes with the hair loss, and I thought, you know what? And I think I've done the right steps, and here I am. I'm pretty happy with it.
You've done everything textbook. I mean, okay, you stalled on getting on finasteride sooner, which probably would have helped a lot. I did exactly the same thing. I knew of finasteride, but I mean, we're going back a lot. Yeah, I'm a lot older, so going back. And finasteride was super scary then, and you couldn't go on the forums and ask people questions. There just wasn't that information out there. So it was a case of like, what do I do? And I valued at the time my sex life over my hair. I was in my 20s. But yeah, my biggest regret was not getting on finasteride at an earlier age and holding onto my hair.
I think it's for most of people.
Yeah. And you may have stalled for a few years. I actually 21 I started noticing my hair loss. 33 when I got on finasteride. So 12 years of loss was pretty damning, and 3 hair transplants in that time as well. So yeah, it's been, in terms of I know I've seen on your YouTube channel, it's hugely educating, and I think it's some of the topics that you cover are great, and I know that you offer consultations to patients. So and you're not tied to any doctor here at all, are you? So it's really about your consultations are about educating patients, giving them the information that they need then to go on and choose a doctor of their own choice.
So the only reason why I even started, I always been a proponent of not paying anyone money to do this, because the information is freely available, and I've denied so many times that people were offering me a good amount of money, to be honest, to do like for years. But I always been denying this, and I always was saying the same thing, like, look, information is available for free. Do your research. Do your own research. Don't trust me. Don't trust anyone. Make up your own mind. And that was my mindset. But then when I came back, I've seen all of this left and right. Every single person is doing now consultations on what kind of nonsense they're talking about. And people still asking me while I was absent for nearly 2 years. People still messaging me and emailing me. Can we speak privately? Can I pay you money for this and that? And that's basically the only reason, because there is so much demand. I mean, I wouldn't say it's like people lining up, but there are people who really just want to hear my opinion, because they've been through they've seen the process I went through. They've been following me for many years on my channel. They know my mindset, that I'm unbiased. I'm not tied financially to anyone, and I say the way it is. I'm not going to be recommending any specific clinic and stuff like that. I mean, I can recommend what I think is best, but ultimately it's going to be up to the person. And I just decided, like, look, if people want it, I rather them pay me a small fee for my personal time for them to get a good proper information rather than going to some X, Y, and Z, pay more money more often than not, and get some like very generic, if any, information at all. That's it, really. Because I as we mentioned privately before we started recording, YouTube is not my full-time gig. I'm working full-time. I have a job which is actually I'm working from 40 to 50, 60 hours sometimes a week. I don't have time even for personal things. I barely have free time. So I'm trying to juggle YouTube, replying to God knows how many people on emails and personal, and I thought it's just better. I can better speak for like 45 minutes to one person and make a difference, if it makes sense, rather than just you cannot on the messages as well just give a proper information, and if you can, you're gonna take ages. And I partially why I stopped YouTube again is just because I wanted to focus on other aspects in my life and kind of just.
I think that's the right thing, because I get messages from people and they start to ask you your opinion, and they give you a little bit of information, and it's really difficult because when I've done consultations over the years, and thousands of them, is that you can't just give blanket generic advice to somebody, because it's very different based on their expectations, based on their medical history, all those types of things that you need to take into account. But I think it's good that people are offering these consultations. I think you should be paid for your time. I think doctors should be charging for consultations for their time as well. I think it's important. But sometimes people just want to talk. That they want to talk to somebody, and obviously people will come to you because they relate to your situation. They relate to you as a person. People will come to me because they relate to my experiences, but often you can be the first person that they've spoken to about their hair. They haven't even opened up about their partner, to their family, even their friends. So it almost becomes a little bit like therapy for some people, where they're just being able to talk about their hair and how it makes them feel and the experience and so on often is just enough. So they know about finasteride, they know about minoxidil, they know that they are the best treatments. But just to hear somebody's personal experiences of using the medication and personal experiences about having a hair transplant can be really rewarding for patients.
From what I noticed, and it's funny, I had a consultation with one person last week, and he knew so much. He probably has done nearly as much as I did, research. He still decided that he needs to speak with me, and only because, well, first of all, according to him, nobody knows that he has hair loss, and he's using, the concealers and everything like that. So he doesn't have anyone to speak to about it. So to your point. But then second, sometimes we're becoming overwhelmed with all of this information. And I know I've been there as well. That's why I kind of keep going back and forth. And it's sometimes good to have like this second opinion that's a completely unbiased pair of eyes to see at your situation, at where you're at, and just to kind of give a different perspective. And that's what this person, he went back to Hair Restoration Network forum, and he shared that to everyone, because he had a massive post. He said that he spoke to me, and I gave him like a different perspective on what he can or even should do. And I think that's sometimes can be very valuable, because we can be all just thinking like what we think is best, but then and it's probably ideal if the person gonna go to a doctor, but more often than not, doctors are still, biased. A lot of doctors would try to convince people to get into the chair. So you cannot really trust all the doctors. But I know there is some of the, amazing doctors, that I particularly like as well, that they are not afraid to say no and just reject the person, even if someone is not a candidate for a surgery because of their mental state. Maybe they're perfect candidate when it comes to donor and everything else, but just they're not mentally quite there, and they're gonna reject. And I really have a deep respect to this kind of doctors. So with this kind of people, it's definitely worth it to have this kind of second or even third opinion.
Yeah, well, that often is the case
Yep.
with this type of patients. But yeah, I've only ever wanted to work with doctors that are comfortable with saying no to patients, patients who have unrealistic expectations, patients potentially even with body dysmorphia. There's nothing really wrong with their hairline, but they're fixating on it. But also patients with poor donor areas. There's so many reasons of why people make a bad hair transplant candidate, and that's why I think understanding the patient's mental state at the time of surgery, as well as their physical state in terms of their donor area and their recipient area, is really important.
Yeah. So with the rise nowadays with the marketing terms like Sapphire, FE, or like DHI implantations, do you think the patients are kind of getting too obsessed with these terms, with the tool essentially, rather than the hand that is using the tool?
Yeah, 100%. People say to me, should I do DHI or should I do FUE? And basically, that it is the same thing. Well, DHI was obviously originally they were one of the first clinics to do FUE, obviously with the Choi implanter. But people get way too hung up about the type, the size of the punch, the type of the punch, the type of the procedure. Should I use stainless steel blades? Should I use sapphire blades? All of those types of things. I think it's really about the results and who's doing the surgery. So yeah, I think people are way too hung up about those aspects. But what's your view?
Yeah, I always like Joe Tillman's quote, and I quote it all the time because I've heard it in the initial stages when I was researching and learning about it. He said, how is it now? Something that the tool is just as important as the hand that wields it, which is like it's just brilliantly put. It's you give a monkey, a DHI pen is not going to be a great, transplant, or or maybe like a different analogy. If you're gonna, give a bad carpenter, for example, like a golden tool or whatever, he's gonna build a really like crooked table essentially. But if you're gonna, give someone a terrible tool, but someone with a high skill, they're gonna create a great, result. So it's not about the technique. I've seen plenty of the benefit of DHI is that with the Choi pens that you have a really good control of angles and depth. But if you don't know what you're doing, I've seen plenty of results like sticking 90 degrees up in the hairline and they're using the DHI. So if the tool is capable, it doesn't mean you can or even how to use it properly.
Well, absolutely, and that's the thing is that I always liken it to putting up some shelves in terms of like I can put up some shelves, but I probably won't do it as well as if I got a professional carpenter to come in and do it, and
So the same tools.
Yeah, exactly, with the same tools, exactly, because I can drill into a wall and make a right mess of it, and
Yeah,
then
exactly.
I end up having to put a massive, great big raw plug in there and do a bit of filling, but I can hide it by putting a picture up on there behind me here. So yeah, everyone's different, and I think it is really about who is wielding those tools rather than the tools themselves, because and you'll talk to different doctors and they use different punches and they use different, so some doctors will make the incisions with an implanter, some will use pre-made incisions, and there's always a different argument between one doctor to the other as which is better. Saying, well, actually if I make pre-made incisions, I can get the density better, and then another doctor will say that there's less handling, obviously, with the implanters and so on. And I've seen, like, side by side, actually, I took some footage of Dr. Manny's clinic of the implanter pen and also with forceps implanting, and both did the job. It's really about the hands that were implanting those grafts.
Precisely. That's why I always say the most important thing is consistency.
Yeah.
That's all that matters. As long as the doctor is consistently producing great results, who cares what tool are they using? I've seen plenty of amazing world-class results with the standard, pre-made incisions with just a steel blade, not sapphire nonsense, and plenty of bad DHI results as well. So it has nothing to do, with the tool. It's all about who is doing the surgery.
Yeah,
Full
absolutely.
stop.
And the rest of it is just marketing, isn't it, really?
Yep.
For some reason, people seem to think that DHI is better than FUE. Sapphire blades are better than stainless steel. Doctors will argue that. I can see the pros and the cons and the fours and the whys and so on. But ultimately,
And every
as you
doctor
say,
gonna use, and gonna argue there in what they're using, and it's fine,
yeah,
and it's totally fine. Again, it doesn't matter. There might be this minuscule differences, and again, but most of them you're never gonna see. It's been proven time and time again that you can have fantastic results with a very basic set of tools. 20 years
absolutely.
later, it's still the same.
Out of interest, before we move on, Dr. Ferreira, who did your procedure, what tool does he use, and in terms of like the whole process?
He's using implanter pens for implantations. However, funnily enough, and that showed, to his credit, his skill. In my first surgery, I had a lot of popping. So whenever he's implanting the second, then the graft next to it pops out. Obviously, not a great complication because then handling grafts more often, you have to push them back in. More trauma, potential that they're not gonna grow back at all. So it's not a great sign. But what he decided to do, he decided to step back and slow down. And he actually decided to do some pre-made incisions and then implant, still with the DHI pen, the implanter pens, but without actually penetrating the skin with the implanter pen itself. So it does minimizing, the popping essentially. And how many doctors would have this experience and expertise to, when there's this kind of complication, to actually change what they because normally he's using implanter pens across the board. And he's doing all the implantations or all the extractions with the FE method as well. So, he can do both. And my whole hairline has been reconstructed just with the pre-made incisions, essentially.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, well, absolutely. And that's the thing. So most of my hairline's been done using, stainless steel blades to make the incisions, so pre-made incisions, and then forceps placement. So again, we've had two very different procedures. A lot of mine's done using FUT as well. Yours is all FUE. So very different journeys in terms of the actual surgical steps. But I would expect that we've got what looks like very natural looking results with great angles, great growth, all those types of things. So again, two examples here as to why it doesn't really matter. It's about the individual. And I was at Dr. Manny's clinic recently, and he's able to place the grafts as well. So he was placing grafts himself. And again, I think that's really important that you can find a doctor who can do everything, because if a staff member phones in sick for whatever reason and you're down on staff and you want to get those grafts in as soon as possible, that the doctor can adapt to that as well. So I think that's a really positive thing.
Yeah, that's another variable that nobody thinks about.
Yeah, exactly.
Someone gonna call in sick.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's been really great to talk to you, Rolandas, and perhaps we'll pick this up again. I'm sure there's lots more that we can talk about. And but thank you for joining me on the podcast. And as I say, you can find you on YouTube. I think you're going to be collaborating on this video. And thanks once again, and have a lovely rest of the evening.
Thanks so much for having me. It was a pleasure, and like you said, we can just keep going for hours and hours. But thanks so much for having. It was a pleasure to talk about all these topics, and I hope we're gonna do it again.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.